Well, hello. This is the City of Everett, June 28, 2023, our Safe Community Council committee meetings. Normally we have this meeting the last Wednesday of the month from 5 to 6 p.m. here in the chambers. My name is Don Schwab. I am City Council Member District 3. The public is always welcome to attend in person or remotely. During these committees, like others, there is no public comment during these committee meetings, but the public is always welcome to submit emails, make phone calls to the council, and also show up during the public comment meeting during our regular scheduled council meetings. And as usual, you can always watch remotely, and we have a YouTube channel that's pretty active. So I'll just go around the room here and have everyone introduce themselves.
I'm Council Vice President Judy Toohey.
Tom Hood, Public Works Staff.
Jennifer Gregerson, Government Affairs Director.
Thank you, and thank you for all of you who have showed up here. We appreciate your enthusiasm and your involvement in our city. So again, we have 3 agenda items, and then a 4th one on here will be determining where we want to go with our next. We have several ideas that we're going to talk about later to determine what we want on next agenda. So let's begin with agenda item number 1, the ADA transition plan briefing.
Great, thanks Councilmember Schwab. So to kick off the briefing about the right-of-way ADA transition plan, I guess I'll just start by saying that while this is an official plan, frankly, this is something that Public Works has been doing for a long time before the advent of the transition plan. We've always taken the needs of the disabled community seriously, and we do our best with the resources we have to provide facilities for them within the right-of-way. So a little background, the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was signed into law in 1990, and essentially it's an extension of the Civil Rights Act, and it provides protections for people with disabilities. And it states that facilities and services must be accessible to those individuals with disabilities. In regards to public agencies, it applies to all agencies with greater than 50 employees, and that they must develop an ADA transition plan for their facilities. There's a few mandatory elements of a transition plan. Essentially, the first one listed is identifying barriers. That is one of the more challenging tasks because we have to inventory our entire street network for all pedestrian facilities to identify those barriers that exist. We then have to develop methods that we're going to use to make unaccessible facilities accessible in the future, and then a schedule and a methodology for removing those barriers and replacing them with accessible facilities. We identify an official responsible for implementing the plan, and then we take public feedback both in the development of the plan and in ongoing maintenance and implementation of that plan. So let's talk a little bit about some of the types of barriers that we have within the right-of-way. The obvious ones that we've all seen can be broken and uneven sidewalks. Tree roots have a lot to do with that. We get heaving of sidewalks and things like that. There are obstructions within the sidewalk occasionally, power poles, signal poles, things like that block accessibility. Curb ramps can be a challenge. Some are missing. Some are so old that they don't meet current accessibility criteria. And then we can have also pedestrian crossings with push buttons that don't meet current standards. And I'll show you a few examples of those. So for sidewalk barriers, a couple here. You can see obviously on the left, the cracked and uneven sidewalks. Anything with more than 1/4 inch of vertical separation is considered a barrier. On the right at Evergreen Way and East Casino, the utility poles, overgrown vegetation, all of those obstruct the accessible path. We can also have, like at Hoyt and 41st, where curb ramps just aren't there. And the picture on the right shows a very old ramp with the steeper wings on the sides that don't meet slope criteria, with no flat landing of adequate size behind it. So that ramp is considered inaccessible. After barrier removal, we have the newer style ramps that I'm sure you're all familiar with. They tend to be a lot larger because of the flatter slopes on the wings. They can also, in lieu of wings, they can have a 4-foot flat landing behind the top of the ramp. They tend to be marked with the yellow truncated domes, as they're known, for tactile and visibility enhancement. Here's that same corner at Hoyt and 41st after our street department installed a new accessible ramp. And on the right is another example of an accessible ramp. What you can't see there fully is the 4-foot flat landing at the top of the ramp behind, which does make it accessible even with the steeper side wings. So push button barriers, to activate the pedestrian crossing signals, they can be either inaccessible or inaudible. We have several poles in town. You can see these old concrete exposed aggregate signal poles circa 1970s and early 1980s, where we put buttons essentially wherever we could fit them at the time. Pedestrian buttons have both minimum and maximum mounting heights, and they have to be reachable and visible from the pedestrian path and within a certain distance. So here's a couple of photos that show the newer style pedestrian buttons that you've probably seen, especially in the downtown area. These have both tactile and audible feedback. And they are placed at proper mounting heights and within proper distances of the ramps for accessibility. So the ADA transition plan was adopted in 2021. We were mandated to adopt by June 30th. We actually adopted in April of 2021. And this started with, as I mentioned before, the self-evaluation inventory. We spent quite a bit of staff time evaluating and inventorying the entire network, and he came up with a list of barriers that needed to be addressed. And then with that list of barriers, as everyone knows, obviously, there's always more to do than there are resources to do it. So we established a prioritization method. The top priority is and always has been our service request process, which is where people can call in or use our web portal or email Public Works, a variety of methods to get a hold of us and let us know that there is a barrier that they want removed in their path. And those become our highest priorities as we are able to get to them. We do those. We also look for areas in the city with higher concentrations of people with disabilities and prioritize those. And that would include areas with services like government offices, transit, medical centers, schools, things like that. to make sure that those routes are accessible as possible. The second priority would be areas with maybe a lower concentration of people with disabilities and other types of commercial areas and entertainment and employment centers. And then our bottom priority would be all other areas essentially, and people with lower, areas with lower concentrations of people with disabilities. And then here's a map that shows kind of a graphical representation of those priority areas that we were talking about. In green is the higher priority. You can see their surrounding schools, their surrounding government offices, Providence Medical Center, places like that, where we would tend to focus after our service request process.
Question for you here.
Sure.
Question, that was the north end. Are you gonna, do we have maps of the south end priorities?
I don't have that with me.
Okay.
We do have that as well.
That's fine.
I was trying to keep the slide count down a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
So the methodology, basically we have several ways other than the service request method that we go about removing these barriers. Certainly, what's not listed here that I wanted to mention was city maintenance projects. If city crews are doing a water main repair or something and they have to tear up sidewalk, they will generally replace that sidewalk and any affected ADA facilities nearby if they're able to. We also have all of our capital improvement projects and our transportation improvement projects. Whenever those are done, whether it's water main, sewer main, storm, or a street improvement, we will upgrade, if necessary, all of the ADA facilities within the project limits that are affected. We also, under the TIP projects, we also have quite a slate of non-motorized projects that specifically target ADA. Things like the flashing rectangular rapid beacon crosswalks that we've been installing in recent years, and bicycle facilities and other things like that do those upgrades as well. The annual pavement maintenance overlay is a big one for us. Every street that we do overlay through that program, our street department comes out and upgrades any ramps that don't meet current standards as part of that work. So we keep that single concrete crew very busy just with that program. And then on the private development side, we obviously require frontage improvements, except in rare cases. And those frontage improvements will also provide current standard ADA facilities. We do update the plan annually. That essentially allows us to chart our progress, and we update our inventory, inputting everything that we've done, all the improvements we've made over the past year. We look again at our project prioritization and our methodologies, see if there are additional funding sources we can seek to help us with this work, and continue to expand our inventory as new projects come on board and are constructed. And that is all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Questions?
I have a couple. Thanks for all this information and update. Appreciate it. I've been seeing you guys out there working on the ramps. So when there is a vegetation overgrown area, Do you work with the homeowners on that, or do you guys just kind of tell them, or do you ask the homeowners to trim back?
We generally send a letter to the homeowner as our first contact, asking them to take care of it. It is their responsibility to maintain that vegetation. Usually, people do that and take care of it. On occasion, we have had our street crews just do it. But in general, we like to have the property owners take care of that.
And so, I know that there's sometimes when trees, you can't see stop signs very well and things like that. You guys also look for that? Okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
'Cause there's one on my way home that has ivy growing up and coming out the top of the stop sign. It's like, it looks like it has hair. Anyway, I'll tell you about that one. It needs to be trimmed, the ivy. And then, do you guys get grants for some of this stuff?
A lot of the non-motorized projects that we do through the TIP are grant funded.
Okay,
Yes, we don't get grant money for maintenance, other than occasionally for the overlay. But then city forces are doing our ramp work anyway.
yeah, okay, great, thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, I had one question or a couple, or just so you can make some comments about city-owned properties, public works facility or parks, that type of thing. Does the program include those locations?
This presentation tonight was just about the right-of-way transition plan, but yes, there is a citywide, because the public agency obviously includes all of the city of Everett. We have a citywide ADA transition plan. And that is headed up, I believe, by administration, but I can't really speak to it, so I don't know. But I know that other city departments underwent the same process in the time frame that Public Works did. But our plan is separate because it is the largest ADA facility plan in the city.
I'm assuming facilities and parks have their own plan then?
Yes, I mean, I would say, I don't know for sure,
Yeah.
but that's the way that the federal law is. You have to look at, and it's like, it's really everything. So even things like the accessibility of our city website and communications come into play, and then certainly parks and facilities and just sort of all those touches that an individual might have with the city.
Right, so if you could just maybe follow up down the road
Yeah.
a little bit on the parks and the city offices. That'd be great, thanks. Did you have any other questions?
Just one.
Yeah.
So if you can just run by again, so if someone in their neighborhood sees that we could use, has ADA, inaccessibility, and so they should contact the Public Works on the website, where should they go?
Yeah, there's a few methods you can use. The easiest probably is the website portal at everettwa.gov. And on that website, if they prefer to call in, there's also the number for our Public Works dispatch. They'll be happy to take that information as well and pass it along to the team.
Okay, great, I think that's important. So they're looking for the Public Works on our website.
Yes.
Perfect, great, thank you.
Good question, thanks for that. Okay, that concludes agenda item number 1. Item number 2, the firearms ammunition sales tax draft ordinance review. And this is something that came up from a council meeting, and we thought we'd take a deeper dive, thank you, into what that would look like, and do you have an update?
I do, yeah.
Thank you.
So not an extensive one, the actual ordinance is still being reviewed, but I figured I could bring a few elements of it for your feedback and discussion. So we're working from the ordinance that Seattle and Tacoma have passed. One of them I think was in 2016, the other in 2020, so they've been in effect for a little while. I haven't yet reached out to those cities to hear how the implementation has gone, but, so that's kind of the baseline. And I think that there's kind of 3 main areas that I want to point out. The first one, the proposed tax rates portion. We talked a little bit about that last month. So what, I kind of used a little inflation calculator and looked at what it could be today. So the initial concept would be $30 per firearm sold at retail. And then the ammunition tax, there's two pieces to it. So 3 cents per round of ammunition that has a single projectile that measures 22 caliber or less sold at retail. And then 6 cents for basically all other ammunition. And those are just, yeah, those are based off of the other two cities that have done this, but just increased sort of since those passed several years ago. So that is the proposed tax rates piece. There are exemptions, and these are the ones that exist in those other ordinances. So individuals that sell no more than one firearm per quarterly tax reporting period. We have, our business taxes are quarterly, so it's that cycle.
So question, that's one
One
firearm per quarter?
for a year, so if you are like more of a private owner and you just
Wanna
have a
sell.
few per year, yeah, you'd be exempt from this.
Do we have private owners that actually report
I'm not
a
sure.
sale of a firearm?
Yeah, I mean, this would allow them to be exempt. It's probably unlikely unless they have a business license that
Right.
they are, that's just what's on their radar to report that, but
We could add other exemptions also?
sure,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The other two, again, just from those other ordinances, person selling fewer than 50 rounds of ammunition per quarter. And then licensed dealers who only, in the situation where they're only conducting a background check for 2 unlicensed persons engaging in a sale. So someone who's assisting, individual owners to comply with the law wouldn't have to also add this tax onto that private owner sale, or the unlicensed persons engaging in that sale. So those are the only exemptions that are in the Seattle and Tacoma ordinances, and it's what, I haven't added to that, but would be open to your thoughts on those. And then the last piece, the use of the funds, and we talked a little bit about this last month too. So the idea, the language that would be in the ordinance would be that the purpose of this tax fund would be to provide broad-based public benefit, to promote public safety, prevent gun violence, address in part the cost of gun violence in the city. So such public benefits may include, not limited to, basic research, prevention, and youth education. The administrative cost to manage the fund, I don't know that that would be that great, and make tax system modifications. So really the focus there is that, kind of gun violence prevention, youth education. And if there's any other categories or thoughts you have about where the, for the purpose of the tax funds, it would be great to talk about those. I don't have information on the size of what these tax revenues would be. Our initial thought was that it might not be that much. There are probably a handful of businesses that would be impacted, but maybe not super extensive. So in the future, hopefully we might be able to get a little bit more of an estimate, but I don't have it tonight, so.
Okay, so that was the actual revenue generated by it.
Right, so those, the $30 per sale, the ammunition tax, we would, the finance department would create a new fund, and then it would have these restrictions and sort of policy focus on the uses.
To go along with that fund, I'd like to know what the effects were those funds were in Seattle and
Yeah,
Tacoma.
yeah.
Did they go down because the business owners moved out into the unincorporated or other cities? And also, to go along with that, did it have any effect? I'd like to know if they could document any effect that it had on gun violence or the amount of guns that were.
Sure,
I'd like to know if they could quantify something.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have a review if we can get from their staff. And, I know I had a conversation with one business owner this week, and so they're obviously concerned about losing sales. So if they probably have had some little history with their business owners down there. So it'd be great to hear how things turned out down there. It'd be good.
Councilmember Fossey, would you have any questions or any thoughts on?
No, I'll just wait for the review that you brought forward.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think if, I think that was it. I guess down the road, if this potential tax doesn't raise, I think the money that we may need to have an actual program, is there other, could we look at other ways of raising dollars
Yeah.
for these types of programs?
Sounds good.
Any other questions about this one? Okay, thank you for,
Yeah, great. Well,
Okay.
we're early in the analysis, so appreciate kind of some good follow-up tasks to look into. And I've got, folks from legal looking at it and finance team as well. And so this will be some other good policy questions, so I'll work on it.
okay, I appreciate that. Okay, we have one more, and that's, I guess, to discuss what you want on proposed next agenda items.
It's like, what more? I don't,
Oh,
is there
yeah.
another agenda item? No.
One agenda, yeah.
That's good, okay, great. I do tentatively, I will flag that we should hopefully have an update on the buffer zone implementation for you guys next month. So, it's a tentative item to put on for the July 26th, pending lots of staff work, but as a heads up for that.
Okay, so you're talking about bringing that back here, or okay?
Yeah, so it would be, just an update on, we're working through the analysis, and Julie Willie would be able to come and talk about if the sites sort of met the criteria, and they're also working on she had a great name for it. It's like a sort of goods and services distribution permit, something like that. And right now, we just have this right-of-way permit that we're using, and so they're building out what that other method would be. So we should have that hopefully. Theoretically, I'll have this again, the firearms and ammunition tax. I'll be able to kind of bring you back another few pieces.
Okay,
So other than that, whatever your thoughts are on other items.
one of the things that I'd like to start addressing is, there's just been a lot of feedback from our community over the noise ordinance. I'm not necessarily sure what we can do, but I think we should at least dive into I'm saying dive a lot, sorry. We should review what we can affect. And of course, noise comes in multiple things. We have a lot of feedback from our community over the racing and the loud mufflers. And also some of the manufacturing locations. And then the port. And of course, that's going to be being addressed separately.
Yeah.
That's come up in the context of comprehensive plan and land use, but the sort of day-to-day noise, we have ordinances that
Right.
are relevant for that too. I will do all that I can to bring you guys something on the noise ordinance.
One thing about the noise ordinance when it comes to loud vehicles, and I'd spoken with the chief and some of the staff before about, the regulations and if we increase the penalty, will that have any effect? And so maybe just kind of review that question.
Yeah.
I'll just let them, I don't want to answer for them again, but we'll let them kind of review that just to make sure that they're solid in the answer. Because I know that's some of the feedback we get in the community, that we need to increase the penalties as a way to,
Right.
is to decrease the amount of racing and other activities.
I know you guys mentioned it as a priority, and we haven't brought it back yet, so
Right.
that's why I'm like, we'll try to
Yeah, just if we
bring
can
you
just
something.
make some progress, that would be great.
Yeah.
So that's what I had. Anything else here?
I know that we still have the nuisance properties, code enforcement stuff that's still in
Yeah.
here, so would love to have that
That's the other
eventually
one.
kind of tackled, but also with like vacancy. I know there's been a lot of complaints about vacant properties in that process too, and I think it kind of ties into that. Another thing that we had previously asked about was look into a speed reduction on arterials and roads across the city, and I don't think that they had come back yet with information on that, and that was at the time we were looking at the reducing evergreen to make that safer, and then so we brought up the concept of doing that widely across the city, and they said that the city would come back to us, and I don't think we've heard yet.
Yeah, if you have something.
Thank you for
Tom.
bringing those up.
Absolutely, I can respond to that, Councilmember Fosse. Recently, the city received a Safe Streets for All federal grant to do a study of all of the safety issues that we have on our streets. And the grant was fairly significant. Originally, we had planned on doing an arterial speed limit study across the entire city. We've decided to roll that study into the SS4A grant. We're currently scoping right now, getting our PSRC agreement in place so that we can move forward with consultant selection, and we'll be doing a net zero vision document, vision zero document through the SS4A program, including an arterial speed study throughout the city. With that study in place, we'll qualify for implementation grants to build the projects that come out of that study as recommended improvements.
What is the timeline then of transitioning, instead of just a kind of standard speed reduction, what is the timeline then for moving it into that kind of grant process eligibility?
The implementation grants?
So is, instead of just changing things on our arterials and reducing the speeds to what we can just right away across the board, and actually doing a study and then doing it so that we get grants, and then is this prolonging it for, like, when would the results actually be seen in our community?
Well, once the study is finished and we've determined what the appropriate speed limits should be, and that study will likely be done within 12 months or so from now. Once we have those results, we could do a combination of speed limit reductions right away or rolling them into implementation projects, depending on what other improvements might be appropriate to go with those reductions. But if, for instance, if there are roads like Evergreen Way where nothing else is needed but a sign change, then we could move toward implementation right away with city forces potentially.
Okay. I'm just thinking, since we had brought this forward as an action that we had wanted to do last year, because I believe that's when we had done Evergreen last year, and then having another study for another 12 months, and then having, applying for more grants, that just seems like a really elongated, like, timeline for just, if it's just a matter of reducing some of the immediate arterial speed things. I don't think we need necessarily justification if it's a possibility, and neighbors have been asking for it. But
I agree with you on Councilmember Fosse that the community is definitely very interested and support of making some early recommendations on some obvious locations. Yeah.
Yeah, we're always available to hear those and to evaluate those for reductions.
so it sounds like your study is going to be roads across Everett and not just the arterials, correct?
Yes, although the focus will be in the area where safety is a problem, the highest safety problem areas, which are largely with arterials, either arterial intersections or arterial local street intersections.
But you guys would be able to, with our current staff, identify those main arterials fairly easily without having to do a study. And if we just automatically wanted to reduce the speed limits on them, regardless of the safety issues being higher here or higher there, what is the benefit of waiting another year to study it? I understand the value and the very real benefit of the implementation grants. And I appreciate the approach on that. It's just how long that might take for something that we already know that I think the council seems very fond of, at least in our public dialogue. And then our neighbors have also seemed very receptive to in the feedback we've gotten from them, if that's not something that we can just,
If there are particular streets that council wishes to reduce the speed limit on, obviously that's a council action. The Public Works Department would be very interested in discussing those particular streets with council.
and I think that's what we had been asking for. Could Public Works perhaps send me a document identifying the arterials, and we'll just circle,
We could certainly do that.
just to get started, maybe? Okay.
Thank you for that. So,
One other thing on
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And I think that study was also, if I remember right, was going to give us some other traffic calming ideas in more residential areas where they have people that are just going too fast. So that will be part of that.
Yes, it's a
Okay.
very comprehensive study.
That'll be great. Okay.
like Upper Ridge Road and Madison and Beverly Lane and on and on. I'm sure 16th, right? Thank you for that. No, so obviously it's an enthusiastic interest in this particular item there. I mean, so I would encourage you to please continue the dialogue with us. And if there are some tools, even, I like your idea, maybe not as simple as a circle, but it could be. And I do understand that it's really important to look at the larger effects of any change. Of course, our priority is our community safety, is everyone's, but I know there could be some other effects that you could make us aware of too. That would be good.
Certainly.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Is that something that we'll get a future update on? Because obviously that seems like a very, very comprehensive, like, major impact study that would have a lot of things. And pulling out just a couple advanced, like, arterial circles just to have some immediate, like, maybe results on. I didn't want to detract from the comprehensiveness of that, but if we can get an update of kind of like at some point at one of our future meetings on like what you're looking at, because that sounds pretty neat on what you guys might be able to accomplish with that.
For the study? Oh,
Yeah,
certainly.
yeah.
Yeah, and council will obviously see both the consultant agreement and possibly the PSRC agreement.
Good. Thank you for that. So let's kind of, we talked a lot about our agenda, so maybe we could talk a little bit about prioritizing them for kind of before we end our meeting to go over that again. So why don't you start? What do you have for us? So,
Going to get you something on noise,
okay,
nuisance properties, vacant, code enforcement broadly. Not immediately, but when appropriate, update on the Safe Streets for All federal grant and some of the, sort of that big picture look. But also, a little more quickly than that perhaps, a look at specifically arterial street speed limits. And then I mentioned at the beginning, we'll probably have something on the buffer zone implementation, and then the firearms sales tax.
okay. And even, I think, obviously, we have a timeline for the committee, and, we don't want to go for multiple hours, but
We
if-
get kicked out,
even
yeah.
if there's just some progress reports, that would be very
Sure.
welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay, any other further business from our council members?
Keep us busy next month.
Yeah, we will be. Well, this concludes our Safe Community Council Committee meeting. And I want to thank all of you watching either by YouTube or those of you that have arrived in the chambers. And thank you for the mayor, staff, and my fellow council members for participating.